Okay, so we've got this really interesting deep dive ahead of us.
Yeah, it's a big one.
ICTD,
Oh, that's a source.
Information and Communications Technologies for Development, right?
That's the one.
And to be honest, I was a bit intimidated at first.
It is a dense topic.
But I gotta say, after skimming through everything,
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited to dig in.
Me too. There's some really inspiring stuff here.
Like, I had no idea how much technology is being used to address global challenges.
It's amazing.
From fighting poverty to improving healthcare to, well, you name it.
And it's not just about fancy gadgets either.
Right. It's about using technology in smart, innovative ways to make a real difference in people's lives.
Exactly. And your sources really highlight that human-centered approach.
I noticed that too. There's a lot of emphasis on the importance of community involvement, cultural sensitivity, and ethical considerations.
Which is crucial because technology can be a powerful tool, but it's not a magic bullet.
Right, like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
And it's up to us to make sure it's used responsibly and ethically.
Which is why this deep dive is so important.
Absolutely. We need to understand both the potential and the pitfalls of ICTD.
So we can harness its power to create a better world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So where should we start?
Well, I think it's helpful to begin with a basic understanding of what human development actually is.
Okay, so back to basics.
And how communication plays a crucial role in that development.
Communication.
Yeah, because it's not just about economic growth.
Right.
It's about empowering people with knowledge, skills, and the ability to connect with each other.
So it's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Exactly.
That's where the digital divide comes in, right?
Ah, yes, the infamous digital divide.
But that term always makes me think of people in remote villages who don't have internet access.
Which is certainly part of the issue, but it's actually much more complex than that.
Okay, so unpack that for me. What is the digital divide, really?
It's about more than just physical access to technology. It's also about having the skills to use that technology effectively, the ability to access relevant information, and the opportunity to participate in the digital economy.
So it's about ensuring that everyone has the chance to benefit from the digital revolution.
Precisely. And your sources do a great job of highlighting the various dimensions of the digital divide.
I noticed that they even challenged some common assumptions about it.
Like what?
Well, for example, one of the readings pointed out that even people who have access to technology may not be able to use it effectively due to things like low digital literacy, lack of relevant content in their language, or even social and cultural barriers.
That's a really important point. The digital divide isn't just a technological problem, it's also a social and economic one.
So it's about addressing those underlying inequalities that prevent people from fully participating in the digital world.
Exactly.
You know, it's interesting. One of the documents actually argues that the digital divide is more like a digital spectrum.
A spectrum.
Yeah, with varying levels of access and inclusion.
So it's not just a binary have or have not situation.
Right. It's more nuanced than that.
That's a really helpful way to think about it because it recognizes that people's experiences with technology are diverse and complex.
And that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to bridging the digital divide.
Absolutely.
So if we want to use ICTs for development effectively, we need to take a multifaceted approach that addresses all these different aspects of the digital divide.
Couldn't agree more.
You know, another thing that struck me from the readings is that there's a real risk of technology exacerbating existing inequalities.
Absolutely. That's a critical point that often gets overlooked in all the hype about technological innovation.
Right. Like, if we're not careful, technology can actually widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
For example, if educational opportunities are increasingly delivered online, but certain communities lack access to affordable internet or digital literacy skills,
then they'll be left behind.
Exactly. And the same applies to healthcare, economic opportunities, and pretty much every other aspect of life.
So it's not enough to simply provide access to technology.
We also need to address the underlying social and economic factors that create those inequalities in the first place.
And ensure that technology is used in a way that benefits everyone, not just a privileged few.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've talked about the digital divide and the potential risks of technology exacerbating inequalities.
Right.
But what about the potential benefits?
Oh, there are countless benefits.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, ICTs can empower people with information and knowledge.
Which is crucial for making informed decisions about their lives.
Exactly. Think about farmers who can access real-time market prices on their mobile phones, or patients who can consult with doctors remotely via telemedicine.
Or students who can learn from the best teachers in the world through online courses.
Precisely. ICTs can break down barriers of distance, time, and cost, making information and education accessible to people who might otherwise be excluded.
It's like democratizing knowledge.
In a way, yes.
And it's not just about information.
ICTs can also connect people with each other, creating new opportunities for collaboration, social interaction, and economic exchange.
Right. Think about social media platforms that allow people to connect with friends and family around the world, or online marketplaces that connect small businesses with global customers.
Exactly. ICTs can foster a sense of community, even across geographical boundaries.
And they can empower people to participate in the global economy, regardless of where they live.
That's a key point, because ICTs can be a powerful engine for economic growth, especially in developing countries.
But it's important to remember that technology is just a tool.
Absolutely. It's how we use that tool that ultimately determines its impact.
So we need to ensure that ICTs are used in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Which is why the ethical considerations are so crucial.
Right, because technology can be used for good or for bad.
And it's up to us to make sure it's used responsibly and ethically.
Okay, so we've talked about the digital divide, the potential risks and benefits of ICTs for development, and the importance of ethical considerations.
Right.
What else do we need to consider?
Well, I think it's helpful to look at how ICTs are being used in specific sectors, like healthcare, education, and agriculture.
Okay, so let's dive into some real-world examples.
Sounds good to me.
I'm particularly interested in the use of ICTs in healthcare.
That's a great place to start, because healthcare is one of the areas where ICTs are having a truly transformative impact.
Like I've heard about things like telemedicine and mobile health apps.
Those are great examples, but it goes far beyond that.
So, tell me more.
Well, for example, ICTs are being used to develop early warning systems for disease outbreaks, track the spread of pandemics, and provide remote diagnosis and treatment to patients in underserved areas.
It's incredible how technology can break down barriers of distance and access in healthcare.
Absolutely. And it's not just about providing access to healthcare, it's also about improving the quality of care. Well, for example, ICTs can be used to monitor patients' vital signs remotely, provide personalized health information and education, and even connect patients with support groups and online communities.
It sounds like ICTs are empowering patients to take control of their own health.
Exactly. And that's a crucial aspect of ICT for development. It's not just about providing services, it's about empowering people to improve their own lives.
Okay, so we've seen how ICTs are transforming healthcare.
Right.
What about education?
Education is another area where ICTs have enormous potential.
Like I've heard about online learning platforms and educational apps.
Those are great examples, but it's not just about providing access to educational content.
What else is there?
Well, for example, ICTs can be used to personalize learning experiences, provide real-time feedback to students, and connect learners with each other and with mentors.
So it's about creating a more engaging and interactive learning environment.
Exactly. And it's about making education more relevant to the needs of individual learners.
And it's not just about formal education.
Yeah. Absolutely. ICTs can also be used for informal learning, vocational training, and lifelong learning.
So it's about empowering people to acquire the skills and knowledge they need to succeed in the 21st century.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've talked about healthcare and education.
Right.
What about agriculture?
Agriculture is another sector where ICTs are having a major impact.
Like, I've heard about farmers using mobile phones to access market information.
That's a classic example, but it goes far beyond that.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, for example, ICTs are being used for precision agriculture, which involves using sensors and data analytics to optimize crop yields and reduce waste.
So it's about making agriculture more efficient and sustainable.
Exactly. And it's about empowering farmers with the information and tools they need to make informed decisions.
And ICTs can also be used to connect farmers with buyers, suppliers, and financial services.
Right, which can help them get a better price for their products and access the resources they need to grow their businesses.
It sounds like ICTs are transforming the agricultural landscape.
They certainly are. And that's having a ripple effect on food security, livelihoods, and rural development.
So it's not just about technology. It's about using technology to address some of the most pressing challenges facing humanity.
Exactly. And that's what makes ICT for development such a fascinating and important field.
Okay, so we've seen how ICTs are being used in healthcare, education, and agriculture.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture?
What do you mean?
Well, how do ICTs fit into the broader context of global development?
That's a great question, and it's one that your sources delve into in detail.
I'm all ears.
Well, for starters, ICTs are recognized as a key enabler of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs.
Remind me what those are again?
The SDGs are a set of 17 goals adopted by the United Nations in 2015.
Right.
They aim to address a wide range of global challenges, from poverty and hunger to climate change and gender inequality.
And ICTs are seen as a crucial tool for achieving those goals.
Absolutely, because ICTs can accelerate progress in virtually every area of development.
Can you give me some specific examples?
Sure. For example, ICTs can be used to improve access to education and healthcare, promote sustainable agriculture, empower women and girls, and create decent work opportunities.
It sounds like ICTs are a game changer for global development.
They have the potential to be. But it's important to remember that technology is not a silver bullet.
Right. It's how we use it that matters.
Exactly. We need to ensure that ICTs are used in a way that is equitable, inclusive, and sustainable.
And that they benefit everyone, not just a privileged few.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've talked about how ICTs fit into the broader context of global development.
Right.
But what about the role of governments and international organizations?
They play a crucial role in promoting ICT for development.
How so?
Well, for starters, governments can create an enabling environment for ICT adoption and innovation.
Like what?
They can invest in infrastructure, develop policies that support the ICT sector, and promote digital literacy among their citizens.
So it's about creating the right conditions for ICTs to flourish.
Exactly. And international organizations can play a role in supporting developing countries with ICT infrastructure development, capacity building, and policy advice.
So it's a collaborative effort.
It has to be, because no single actor can address the complex challenges of ICT for development alone.
You know, one of the readings mentioned the importance of public-private partnerships.
That's another important aspect, because the private sector has a lot to offer in terms of innovation, expertise, and investment.
So it's about bringing together the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this initial exploration of ICT for development,
We certainly have.
from basic concepts to real-world examples and the role of different actors.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I'm excited to dig deeper.
Me too. There's so much more to explore, continuously evolving.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface, though. There's so much more to explore in how ICTs are being used for good.
Absolutely. And your sources dive deep into some really inspiring applications, especially in the context of global development goals.
Okay, remind me what those are again.
Think of them as a blueprint for a better future. They address key challenges like poverty, hunger, education, gender equality, and of course, sustainability.
Right, those big interconnected issues. So how do ICTs fit into that picture?
They're not just a tool, but a catalyst. They can accelerate progress towards these goals in ways we couldn't have imagined before.
One example that really caught my attention was this concept of gross national happiness that was mentioned in the chapter on global development goals. It sounds like something out of a fairy tale.
It's actually a real thing, and it's fascinating. The King of Bhutan introduced this idea, shifting the focus from purely economic indicators to the well-being of his people.
So instead of just measuring GDP, they're looking at happiness. How do you even quantify that?
It's a holistic approach, taking into account factors like mental health, community vitality, and environmental conservation. And while it's not without its complexities, it highlights the importance of considering well-being alongside economic growth.
That's such a refreshing perspective, especially in a world obsessed with economic growth. But how do ICTs come into play here?
Imagine using mobile technology to connect remote communities with mental health services or online platforms to promote environmental awareness and sustainable practices. That's just a glimpse of how ICTs can contribute to a more holistic vision of development.
I'm starting to see the potential. It's not just about building fancy gadgets. It's about using technology to address real human needs.
Exactly. And speaking of addressing needs, your sources also explore the practical applications of ICTs in various sectors, starting with agriculture.
Oh yeah, we touched on that earlier with the Reuters Market Light example. It's amazing how something as simple as a mobile phone can empower farmers with vital information.
But it goes beyond just market updates. Think about using drones for precision agriculture, sensors for monitoring soil conditions, and online platforms for connecting farmers with buyers and suppliers.
It sounds like we're talking about a digital revolution in agriculture.
It's happening right now, and it has the potential to transform food security, livelihoods, and environmental sustainability.
But I imagine there are challenges too, right? Not all farmers have access to smartphones or the internet.
That's where the digital divide comes back into play. We can't assume that everyone has equal access to these technologies or the skills to use them effectively.
So it's not just about developing the technology, but also ensuring it reaches those who need it most.
And that it's designed in a way that's culturally appropriate and user-friendly. Remember those info ladies in India we talked about? They're a great example of bridging the digital divide by empowering women to become ICT facilitators in their communities.
Yes, that was such an inspiring story. So we're seeing how ICTs can empower farmers. But what about their impact on accessing essential services like healthcare?
That's another exciting area. We already talked about telemedicine connecting patients in remote areas with specialists in cities.
But it seems like the possibilities go far beyond just virtual consultations.
Absolutely. Think about mobile apps for tracking health records, monitoring chronic conditions, and even delivering personalized health education.
There was a really interesting example in the document about a youth-led project in Pakistan using mobile technology to improve maternal health care in remote areas.
Right, the remote patient monitoring system.
Mm.
They use wearable sensors to collect data from pregnant women, which is transmitted to a central hospital via mobile phones. It's like having a virtual doctor keeping a close eye on their health.
That's incredible. It makes me wonder, what other innovative ways are ICTs being used to improve healthcare in resource-constrained settings?
There are countless examples. Mobile clinics bringing healthcare services to remote villages, online platforms for training community health workers, and even using AI to diagnose diseases based on smartphone images.
It's like the entire healthcare landscape is being reshaped by technology.
And it's not just about providing access to healthcare, but also empowering individuals to take control of their own health and well-being.
Okay, we've talked about agriculture and healthcare. What about education? It seems like that's another area where ICTs have enormous potential.
Absolutely. The document mentioned that the impact of ICTs on education has been profound, second only to their impact on business practices worldwide.
I can see why. From online learning platforms to educational apps, technology is transforming how we learn and access knowledge.
And it's opening up opportunities for people who might not have access to traditional education systems.
I was particularly interested in the Escuela project in the Philippines. They use ICTs to bring formal education to out-of-school youth and disadvantaged communities.
It's a brilliant example of how technology can bridge the educational gap and provide equitable access to learning.
But it's not just about formal education, right? What about using ICTs for things like vocational training and skills development?
That's a crucial aspect as well. Imagine online platforms teaching valuable skills like coding, digital marketing, or entrepreneurship, empowering people to create their own opportunities.
It's like we're talking about a democratization of education, where knowledge and skills are accessible to anyone with an internet connection.
That's the vision, and ICTs are playing a key role in making it a reality.
But let's not forget about the importance of digital literacy. We need to ensure that people have the skills to navigate the online world safely and effectively.
That's a crucial point. Digital literacy is essential for empowering individuals to be critical consumers of information and responsible users of technology.
So it's not just about providing access, but also equipping people with the knowledge and skills to use that access wisely.
Exactly. And that's a theme that runs through all these applications of ICTs. It's not just about the technology itself, but about how it's used and who benefits from it.
We've talked a lot about the positive impacts, but are there any potential downsides to using ICTs for development?
That's a valid question, and it's important to acknowledge that technology is not a silver bullet. It can be misused, it can exacerbate inequalities, and it can have unintended consequences.
So we need to approach it with a critical lens, considering both the potential benefits and risks.
Absolutely. And that's where ethical considerations come in.
Speaking of ethics, the document had a whole section on copyrights, intellectual property rights, and the implications of using technology for development.
Right. These are complex issues, and it's crucial to ensure that ICT projects are implemented in a way that respects the rights of individuals and communities.
I remember the document highlighting the importance of data privacy and informed consent.
Exactly. We need to be mindful of the potential for technology to be used for surveillance or control, and we need to ensure that people's personal information is protected.
So it's about finding a balance between harnessing the power of technology and safeguarding human rights.
Precisely. And that's where responsible innovation comes in designing and implementing technologies in a way that's ethical, sustainable, and beneficial to all.
It sounds like a tall order, but it's essential if we want to create a future where technology truly serves humanity.
And that brings us to another crucial aspect of ICT for development capacity building.
Right, we touched on that earlier. It's not enough to just provide access to technology.
Yeah,
People need to have the skills to use it effectively.
exactly. And capacity building needs to happen at all levels, from policymakers and government officials to teachers, healthcare workers, and community members.
I remember the document emphasizing the importance of training people, not just on the technical aspects of ICTs, but also their applications in different development sectors.
That's crucial. People need to understand how to use these tools to address real-world problems and achieve their development goals.
And capacity building shouldn't be a one-time thing, right? Technology is constantly evolving, so learning needs to be ongoing.
Absolutely. We need to create opportunities for lifelong learning and professional development so that people can keep up with the pace of technological change.
It sounds like a massive undertaking, but it's essential if we want to create a truly equitable and sustainable digital future.
And it's not just about technical skills. It's also about developing critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration skills, the kind of skills that will enable people to thrive in a rapidly changing world.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this vast and complex topic. There's so much more to learn and explore.
Absolutely. And your sources have provided a great foundation for understanding the potential and challenges of ICTs for development.
But before we wrap up this section, I want to touch on one more aspect that really caught my attention, the intersection of ICTs and sustainable development.
Ah, yes, that's a fascinating area. We've already seen how ICTs can contribute to environmental sustainability in agriculture, but it goes far beyond that.
I remember the document mentioning how things like video conferencing and e-commerce can help reduce the need for travel and transportation.
Exactly, and that can have a significant impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
There was also a really interesting example about how mobile phones have become much more eco-efficient over the years.
Right. A decade ago, a single mobile phone call used 10 watts of power. Today, that same call consumes only around 1 watt.
That's a remarkable reduction. It shows how technological advancements can actually contribute to environmental sustainability.
And it's not just about making existing technologies more efficient. We're also seeing the emergence of entirely new green ICTs that are designed with sustainability in mind.
Like what?
Think about solar-powered charging stations for mobile devices, energy-efficient data centers, and even using ICTs to monitor and manage natural resources.
It's amazing how technology can be both a problem and a solution when it comes to the environment.
It all depends on how we choose to use it, and that's where responsible innovation and ethical considerations come back into play.
So it's about harnessing the power of technology to create a more sustainable future, while also being mindful of its potential impacts.
Exactly, and that requires collaboration, creativity, and a commitment to putting people and the planet first.
I'm starting to realize that ICTs are not just about gadgets and gizmos. They're about empowering people, connecting communities, and building a better world.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a reminder that technology is ultimately a tool that we can use to shape the future we want.
Speaking of shaping the future, I noticed the document also talked about the role of ICTs in disaster relief and management.
Yes. That's another area where technology can make a life-saving difference.
I remember reading about how ICTs can be used as early warning systems, coordinating rescue efforts, and even providing vital information to people affected by disasters.
There was a particularly striking example about the Tsunami Early Warning System, or TEWS, in the Asian Pacific region.
Oh yes, tell me more about that.
It's a regional system that uses a network of sensors and communication technologies to detect tsunamis and issue alerts to coastal communities.
So it's like a high-tech safety net that can help save lives in the event of a tsunami.
Exactly, and it's a great example of how regional cooperation and the strategic use of ICTs can make a real difference in disaster preparedness and response.
It makes you realize how powerful technology can be when it's used for good.
And it's not just about high-tech solutions. Even simple things like mobile phones and social media can play a crucial role in disaster situations.
Douse.
Think about people using their mobile phones to connect with loved ones, share information about their safety, or even organize rescue efforts. And social media platforms can be used to disseminate vital information, raise awareness, and mobilize support for disaster relief.
It's amazing how technology can connect people and facilitate communication during times of crisis.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all interconnected and that technology can play a role in strengthening those connections.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from agriculture and healthcare to education and disaster relief. It's clear that ICTs are having a profound impact on development across a wide range of sectors.
And it's an evolving landscape. New technologies are emerging all the time, and the ways in which we use ICTs for development are constantly changing.
So it's an exciting field to be following.
Absolutely. And it's a field that requires constant learning, adaptation, and a willingness to embrace new ideas.
Speaking of new ideas, I'm curious to hear more about the role of ICTs in governance and peace building. It seems like that's another area where technology can make a real difference.
It certainly can, and your sources dive deep into those topics.
I'm all ears.
Well, let's start with e-governance, which is essentially the use of ICTs to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of government services.
I remember coming across that term in the document, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on what it actually means in practice.
Think about online portals for accessing government information, electronic payment systems for taxes and fees, and platforms for citizen feedback and participation.
So it's about making government services more accessible, transparent, and accountable.
Exactly. And it can have a significant impact on reducing corruption, improving service delivery, and empowering citizens.
There was an interesting example in the document about an e-governance initiative in Mongolia that allows citizens to access tax information and file their taxes online.
That's a great example of how e-governance can simplify bureaucratic processes and make government services more convenient for citizens.
And it also helps to increase transparency and accountability.
Precisely. When processes are digitized and information is readily available, it's much harder for corruption to thrive.
So e-governance is about using technology to create a more efficient, transparent, and citizen-centric government.
That's a great way to summarize it.
But what about peace building and conflict resolution? How can ICTs contribute to those efforts?
That's another fascinating area. ICTs can be powerful tools for fostering dialogue, building trust, and facilitating communication between different groups.
I remember the document mentioning the use of social media platforms to disseminate information and mobilize communities during times of conflict.
That's right. Social media can be used to raise awareness about human rights violations, organize protests, and connect with international organizations for support.
But the document also cautioned about the potential risks associated with using ICTs in conflict zones.
Yes, it's crucial to be mindful of the potential for misinformation, hate speech, and the manipulation of information online.
So while ICTs can be powerful tools for peace building, it's important to use them responsibly and ethically.
Absolutely. And that requires careful planning, ongoing monitoring, and a commitment to dialogue and collaboration.
It seems like there's a recurring theme here. Technology is a powerful tool, but it's how we use it that ultimately determines its impact.
That's a wise observation. And it's a reminder that we need to approach ICTs for development with a critical and ethical mindset.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but about the values, principles, and intentions behind it.
Precisely. And that's what makes this field so fascinating and challenging.
It's not just about building better gadgets, but about building a better world.
And that's a goal worth striving for.
I couldn't agree more. But before we move on, there's one more source I'd like to discuss. The one that explores the role of social media in development and governance.
Ah, yes. That's a particularly timely and relevant topic. Social media has emerged as a powerful force in recent years, and its impact on development is undeniable.
One thing that really struck me was how social media has transformed the way people engage in activism and advocacy.
That's right. The source discussed the concept of hashtag activism, where people use social media platforms to raise awareness about issues, mobilize support, and even put pressure on governments and institutions.
We've seen countless examples of this in recent years, from the Arab Spring uprisings to the hashtag #MeToo movement.
Exactly. Social media has given a voice to marginalized communities and empowered individuals to connect with like-minded people and advocate for change on a global scale.
But the source also acknowledged that there's a debate about the effectiveness of hashtag activism.
Some argue that it's just slacktivism, people making a superficial effort without any real impact.
But others argue that it's a valuable first step towards more meaningful engagement.
Right. It can be a way to raise awareness, educate people, and build momentum for offline action.
So it's a complex issue with both potential and limitations.
Indeed. And it highlights the importance of using social media strategically and thoughtfully for social change.
The source also highlighted the role of social media in promoting e-participation, which is essentially using technology to broaden and deepen citizen engagement in political processes.
We're seeing governments around the world using social media platforms to connect with citizens, gather feedback, and even facilitate online voting.
And the source mentioned a really interesting initiative in Brazil called VoteWeb.
Yes. VoteWeb uses a variety of online tools and platforms to engage citizens in discussions about public policy and encourage them to participate in the decision-making process.
So it's about creating a more inclusive and participatory democracy.
Exactly. And this is just one example of how social media is being used to transform governance around the world.
But the source also cautioned about the potential downsides of social media.
Of course. We have to be mindful of issues like misinformation, cyberbullying, and the potential for these platforms to be used for surveillance and control.
Right, it's a double-edged sword. We need to be critical consumers of information online and advocate for responsible and ethical use of these powerful technologies.
One of the sources emphasized the importance of digital literacy and navigating the complexities of the online world.
It's about being able to critically evaluate information, identify biases, and understand the ways in which these platforms can be used to manipulate opinions and behaviors.
And this brings us back to that idea of capacity building, which is essential for ensuring that everyone can benefit from the opportunities offered by ICTs and social media.
Well, this has been quite a journey. From understanding the digital divide to exploring real-world applications of ICTs in various sectors and delving into the ethical considerations, we've covered a lot.
Absolutely. And it's exciting to see how ICTs are not just transforming technology, but also reshaping how we approach development itself. It's about empowering people, connecting communities, and ultimately building a more equitable and sustainable future.
Really struck me is how intertwined all these issues are. We can't talk about ICTD without addressing the digital divide, ethical considerations, capacity building, and the importance of responsible innovation.
That's exactly right. It's a complex ecosystem, and it requires a holistic, multifaceted approach.
I think what will stick with me the most is that technology is a tool, and like any tool, its impact depends entirely on how we choose to use it.
A powerful tool that can be used for good or for bad. It's our collective responsibility to ensure that ICTs are harnessed for positive change and contribute to a more equitable and sustainable world.
Absolutely. Well, listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. It certainly has for us. The potential of ICTs for development is immense, but realizing that potential requires ongoing learning, critical thinking, and a commitment to using this technology responsibly and ethically.
And remember, this conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, asking questions, and engaging with the ever-evolving world of ICTD.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.